The hollow market smelled like rust and despair. Walked through its narrow paths, stepping over broken crates and avoiding the eyes of merchants who sold things that decent people did not want to buy. This place existed on the edge of Galactic Union space, in a station called 9. It was where failed experiments came to die. It was where broken machines were sold for parts. It was where creatures that nobody wanted waited in cages for the incinerator. Did not belong here. He was a discharged freighter pilot with 30 credits to his name and a ship that barely held together. He had come to buy protein paste and maybe a cheap navigation chip. Nothing more, nothing strange. But trouble found him anyway. He saw the cage at the end of a row. It was small, barely big enough for its occupant. A sign hung from the bars in 3 languages. The Union Standard read, Biological Remnant Non-Viable 3 credits. Inside the cage lay a dragon. No, not a dragon, corrected himself. A drake. He had heard stories about them during his years in space. They were supposed to be magnificent creatures, bonded war mounts of a species called the N. But the N had been extinct for 10,000 years. Without their masters, the drakes had fallen into a sleep that nobody could wake them from. This one looked dead. Its scales had lost their shine. Its body was thin, the bones showing through papery skin. Its eyes were closed. It did not move. It did not seem to breathe. A 4-armed merchant noticed looking. The alien laughed, a wet sound that made skin crawl. You want that thing, human. It hasn't moved in 40 station cycles. Tomorrow it goes to the furnace. 3 credits is more than it's worth, but I'm feeling generous. Should have walked away, he knew this. He had 30 credits and 3 of them could buy him food for a week. The drake was clearly beyond saving. Every scientist in the Union agreed that drakes could not be awakened without a N-bond master. The creature was brain-dead, a vegetable with scales. But then the drake's eye opened, just a crack just for a moment. And it looked at him. Felt something move in his chest. He did not understand it. He could not explain it. But he recognized that look. It was the look of something that had been abandoned, something that had been written off, something that was waiting to be thrown away. He knew that look because he had seen it in his own mirror. 3 credits, he said. The laughed again. You humans are as stupid as they say, but credits are credits. He took his money and unlocked the cage. It's your problem now. Good luck getting it off my hands before it rots. The other merchants watched as dragged the cage toward the docking ring. They whispered to each other and shook their heads. Another fool human, they said. Another soft-hearted primate wasting money on garbage. Ignored them. He hauled the cage up the ramp of his ship, the second-hand chance. It was a fitting name. The ship was held together with prayers and salvaged parts. It had been heading to the scrapyard when bought it for almost nothing. He had spent 3 years rebuilding it, keeping it flying when everyone said it should be dead. Maybe he had a weakness for lost causes. He set up a heat lamp in the cargo bay. The drake's body was cold, too cold for a living thing. He dripped water into its mouth, careful not to choke it. He checked for wounds and found old scars, marks of chains and collars and things he did not want to think about. The night cycle came, sat beside the cage not expecting anything. He had no plan, he had no hope, he just did not want the creature to die alone. He talked to it. He told it about his life, about the freight company that had discharged him for refusing to smuggle weapons, about the family he had not spoken to in years, about the dream he once had of exploring the deep black and finding something beautiful. I don't know if you can hear me, he said. I don't know if there's anything left in there, but you're not alone anymore. Whatever happens, you're not alone. He was exhausted. His eyes were closing. Without thinking, he did something that humans did without thinking, something that no other species in the known galaxy did. He knelt beside the cage. He reached through the bars. He placed his hand gently on the drake's snout. And he knelt there, not to beg, not to submit, but to meet the broken creature at its level. The drake's eye opened. Not a crack this time. Fully. Completely. The amber iris blazed with light that had not been seen in 10,000 years. And the dragon roared. The sound shook the hull of the second-hand chance. Alarms screamed across the docking ring. For 3 eternal seconds, every sentient being on Station 9 stopped what they were doing. They felt something they could not name, something ancient, something that remembered when the stars were young. The cage bars bent. The drake rose on legs that had not moved in 40 cycles. It stood over, huge and terrible and beautiful. Should have been afraid, he should have run. But he stayed kneeling, his hands still extended, his heart pounding in his chest. The drake lowered its head. And it bowed too. In the silence that followed, heard a voice in his mind. It was not words exactly. It was more like warmth, like embers coming back to life, like a fire that had been waiting 10,000 years for someone to bring the kindling. The voice said, "Bond brother, at last." On Station 9, in a ship held together by hope and stubbornness, a human and a dragon looked at each other. Outside, the galaxy continued its business, unaware that everything had just changed. The had awakened. And this time, they had chosen their own master. News traveled fast in the Galactic Union. By the time the next day's cycle began, half the station knew what had happened. By the end of the week, the whole sector was talking. A human had awakened a drake. The impossible had become possible. Did not want the attention. He wanted to fly away, to disappear into the deep black with his strange new companion. But the universe had other plans. The drake, he called her now, after a name she had pressed into his mind like warm coals, refused to let him hide. She was weak still, recovering from decades of sleep and years of neglect. But her eyes followed him everywhere, and when he moved toward the pilot's chair to set a course for nowhere, she blocked his path. "We can't stay here," he told her. "They'll come for us." She sent him an image, a wall of flame between them and the dark, protection, safety. "You can barely stand," he said gently. "You need time to heal." She sent him another image, himself kneeling in the cargo bay, his hand on her snout. Then a feeling vast and ancient and absolutely certain. "This one is ours. This one we keep." Sat down heavily. He was beginning to understand that he had not rescued, she had claimed him. The first visitors arrived 2 days later. A shuttle bearing the seal of the Galactic Union Science Division docked without asking permission. 3 in white coats marched up the ramp of the second-hand chance, armed with scanners and questions. "This is extraordinary," the lead scientist said. She was tall and thin, with 4 eyes that blinked independently. "The bonding process requires specific pheromone signatures, telepathic resonance, and genetic markers that humans simply don't possess. What you've done should be impossible." "And yet," the scientist stepped toward, scanner raised. "We need to examine." Growled. The sound was low, barely audible, but the scientists stopped as if they had hit a wall. One of them dropped his scanner. Another backed toward the ramp. "She doesn't like strangers," said. "I'd recommend leaving." They left, but others came. The merchant consortium sent lawyers with contracts and threats. They claimed that the drake was still their property, that the sale had been fraudulent, that owed them compensation. Melted their contracts with a small, precise flame. The lawyers ran faster than the scientists had. The hegemony of sent something worse. They were a martial species, though. For centuries they had tried to weaponize drakes. They had captured dozens, experimented on them, tried every method of control from neural shackles to genetic manipulation. None of it had worked. The drakes had died, one by one, rather than submit. But the hegemony had not given up. When they heard about the human and his dragon, they sent a diplomatic envoy. The envoy looked like diplomats. They wore fine robes and spoke polite words, but saw the way they moved, the way their eyes tracked exits and angles, the way their hands stayed close to hidden weapons. These were not negotiators. They were a kill team wearing diplomatic masks. The hegemony offers partnership, their leader said. He was a massive from many battles with teeth filed to points. We will provide resources, protection, scientific support. In return, you will share the secret of the bonding. There is no secret, said. Everything has a secret. The smile showed all of his sharp teeth. Everything has a price. Uncoiled behind, she was still thin, still weak, but in that moment she seemed to fill the cargo bay. Her eyes burned with amber fire. Her voice echoed in his mind, and somehow, impossibly, in the minds of the as well. You tried to chain us for 1,000 years. You failed. Leave now or learn why. The left, but their ship lingered at the edge of the system, watching, waiting. That night sat within the cargo bay. She was exhausted from the confrontation, her flames dimmed, her body trembling. He brought her water and meat and sat beside her while she ate. I need to understand, he said. They said humans can't bond with drakes. Every scientist in the Union agrees. So how did this happen? Sent him images. He saw the N, her original people, tall and graceful with scales like silver. He saw them performing rituals, ceremonies with incense and chanting and precise movements. He saw other species trying to copy those rituals and failing. Then she showed him the truth. The rituals were theater. The ceremonies were tradition. What mattered, what had always mattered, was the soul behind the gesture. For 10,000 years, every species that had acquired drakes had tried to dominate them. They brought technology. They brought contracts. They brought neural shackles. They came as masters expecting obedience. Had come as something else entirely. He had brought water. He had brought warmth. He had sat through the night with a dying creature that everyone else had thrown away. And when he had reached out, he had not reached down from above. He had knelt. He had met her at her level. Showed him what no database had ever recorded, what no scientist had ever understood. Humans kneel, not to submit, not to beg, but to meet the broken at their level, to say, I am here with you. They had recognized something in that gesture, something they had been waiting 10,000 years to see again. So what now? Asked. We can't stay here. The hegemony won't give up. The Union will keep sending scientists. The consortium will find more lawyers. Rose, she was steadier now, her strength returning. She walked to the cargo bay doors and looked out at the stars. Then she sent him one more image. He saw caves on distant worlds, abandoned stations drifting in the void, asteroid tombs in the depths of space. In each place he saw shapes curled in darkness, drakes, hundreds of them, thousands, sleeping, waiting. Turned to look at him, and her eyes blazed. I am last of my bloodline. When the end fell, my swarm scattered. They sleep still, waiting for the call, but they will wake, bond brother. When the time comes, they will wake. Stared at her, how many? She showed him. He sat down again, his legs suddenly weak. The hegemony won't just give up, he said, when they realize what you are, what this means. I know. They'll bring everything they have. I know. I'm just a freighter pilot. I'm nobody, I can't. She crossed the cargo bay and pressed her head against his chest, the way she had done when she first woke. The gesture was gentle, but the message behind it was firm. You are not nobody. You are the one who knelt. You are the one who stayed. That is enough. That has always been enough. Outside the second-hand chants, the ship began to move. It was not alone anymore. More ships were arriving. The hegemony had decided that diplomacy was over. The hunt was beginning. And somewhere in the depth of space, in caves and tombs and forgotten places, the sleeping dragons stirred. They had heard their queen. They were listening. The nebula was a graveyard of light. Ancient stars had died here long ago, leaving behind clouds of gas and dust that glowed with the memory of their passing. It was a place where ships came to hide. It was also a place where ships came to die. The second-hand chance drifted at the nebula's edge, its engines cold, its lights dim, had run as far as he could. Through 3 star systems, past a dozen checkpoints, dodging patrols and bribing dock workers. But the hegemony had resources that he could not match. They had found him. 12 dreadnoughts hung in the void before him. Each one was a mile long, bristling with weapons that could crack a moon. 200 support crafts surrounded them like insects around a corpse. This was not a patrol. This was not a search party. This was an armada sent to kill 1 man and 1 dragon. The hegemony commander broadcast on all frequencies. His face filled and cold with the filed teeth of a warrior. Human, you have something that belongs to the hegemony. Surrender the Drake and we will let you live. Refuse and you will be atomized. You have 60 seconds to decide. Looked at, she stood beside him in the cramped cockpit, her wings folded, her eyes calm. In the weeks since they had fled 9, she had grown stronger. Her scales had regained their shine. Her fire had returned to full strength. But she was still just 1 dragon, and out there were enough guns to burn a planet. We could still run, he said quietly. There might be a way through the nebula. She sent him an image, the 2 of them forever running, forever hiding, while the galaxy remained unchanged. Then another image, flames in the darkness, not to destroy but to illuminate. No more running. Nodded slowly. He had known this was coming. He had known it from the moment she showed him the sleeping drakes. Some doors, once opened, could not be closed. He opened a channel to the hegemony fleet. Then he walked to the cargo bay and lowered the ramp. Stars and nebula light flooded in. The void stretched before him, beautiful and deadly. Followed him. She stood at his back, her presence warm against the cold of space. Looked out at the armada. 12 dreadnoughts, 200 support craft, enough firepower to end worlds, and facing them 1 battered freighter and 1 dragon. He laughed. The sound carried across the open channel. He could imagine the hegemony commander's confusion, his anger. A human, laughing in the face of annihilation. You spent 10,000 years trying to chain dragons, said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. You captured them. You tortured them. You broke them. And you never understood why it didn't work. The commander's face twisted with rage. 30 seconds, human. You tried to take their loyalty by force. You tried to buy it with technology. You tried to steal it with neural shackles. Shook his head. It never occurred to you to ask them what they wanted. 15 seconds. Stepped aside. Moved forward, her wings spreading, her scales catching the light of dying stars. She was beautiful. She was terrible. She was the last queen of a dying race, and she had been waiting 10,000 years for this moment. Ask them now, Sid. Roared. The sound was not just sound. It was something more, something deeper, a vibration that rippled through space itself. It passed through hulls and shields as if they were not there. It reached into the nebula, into the caves of distant moons, into the tombs of forgotten stations. It was a summons. And they answered. They came from everywhere. From the depths of the nebula, from behind asteroids, from places that should have been empty. First a dozen, then 100, then 1,000. They poured out of the darkness like fire given form, their wings beating in perfect unison, their eyes blazing with amber light. The hegemony fleet opened fire. Missiles streaked through space. Energy beams slashed at the approaching swarm. For a moment, the void was filled with light and thunder. The drakes did not slow down. Weapons that could crack moons splashed harmlessly against scales that had weathered the death of stars. Neural disruptors, the hegemony's greatest weapon against drakes, found no purchase on minds that had been sleeping beyond their reach for 10,000 years. What followed was not a battle, it was a reckoning. Drakes tore through dreadnought hulls like paper. They did not use fire, not yet. They used claws that had existed before these species had learned metallurgy. They used strength that had been building through of sleep. They took the fleet apart piece by piece, methodically, almost gently. Escape pods launched. The Drakes let them go. This was not about destruction. This was about a message. When it was over, stood on the ramp of the second-hand chance, surrounded by a swarm that could conquer the galaxy. Dragons of every size and color drifted in the void around him, their eyes bright, their minds touching his with warmth and gratitude and something that felt like joy. Landed beside him. She was tired but radiant, her scales glowing with inner fire. Her voice filled his mind, and through her, the voices of 1,000 others. They came because you knelt. They woke because you showed them that kindness still exists in this galaxy. They are free because one human decided that a dying dragon in a bargain bin cage was worth 3 credits and a sleepless night. Looked at the swarm, creatures of legend, beings of myth, war mounts that empires had fought and died to control. "What happens now?" he asked. Pressed her head against his chest, the gesture that had become their bond sign. "Now you choose. You are bond brother to the, where you lead, we follow. What would you have us do?" Thought about the hollow market, where creatures were sold for scrap. He thought about the cages and the chains and the sign that read non-viable. He thought about all the broken things in the galaxy, all the discarded people, all the abandoned souls waiting for someone to see them. "Wherever there are cages," he said, "wherever things are thrown away because someone decided they were worthless, that's where we go." The swarm roared. The sound echoed across 100 systems. It reached the halls of the Galactic Union, where councils fell silent and politicians whispered in fear. It reached the hegemony's throne world, where generals stared at empty tactical displays and wondered what they had awakened. It reached the slave markets and the prison stations and the bargain bins of 1,000 hollow markets. And everywhere it reached, the broken and the forgotten lifted their heads. The dragons were coming. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy learned something new. They learned that you could not buy a dragon's loyalty with gold or technology. They learned that you could not take it with chains or neural shackles. They learned that the greatest power in the universe was not force or wealth or cunning. It was compassion. They did not conquer. They freed. They appeared at slave stations and burned away the chains. They landed at prison colonies and tore open the gates. They found the lost and the abandoned and showed them that they were not forgotten. And at the head of the swarm, always, was a battered freighter called the Second-Hand Chance. Its pilot was a discharged human with nothing special about him except one thing. He had knelt. The inn had known it 10,000 years ago. The had remembered it through centuries of sleep. And now the galaxy was learning it too. You do not tame a dragon. You earn one. And humans, alone among all the species of the galaxy, had figured out how. Not with power, not with technology, not with contracts or promises or threats, but with a simple gesture, a moment of connection, a willingness to kneel beside the broken and say, "You are not alone." In the end, that was all it took. 3 credits, 1 sleepless night, 1 hand on a dragon's snout. And the galaxy would never be the same.